And Tom Math is with us. Welcome to Grimerica, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
This will be fun. We were talking about recovery a little bit. I like how this is part of your story. I was watching a video of you too, and it sort of stemmed from that a little bit. So I can't wait to get into that part of this whole thing. You know, the science of Upsight and unveiling the unseen. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Great.
I mean, I guess we should start at the beginning because, I did miss some of the beginning aspect of that. So we can go back to, let's just tease it a little bit like this. Like we had Dean Radin on not too long ago, actually. It was like 2021. I think it was September 2021. And Ions, just to tease a little bit, Ions, you finally got in touch with somebody that would sort of help you with from research standpoint, and you went with Ions to do some studies. So we'll talk about all that later, but it is quite fascinating. Dean's a fascinating guy. They are doing really interesting work over there. So it'll be interesting to see how you led up to that whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want me to give you my backstory? First of all, you want me to explain people what Upsight is, Upsight Vision is?
I guess so, yeah. But I do want to hit the backstory so we don't have to rush. I don't want to rush through the backstory part. We've got some questions about that.
All right. Well, since you teed it up with Ions, let's start there and we can work our way back, because what happened to my vision, however it got there, is kind of extraordinary. And I've labeled it Upside Vision. And Upside Vision is the ability for me to see holographic images that are everywhere around us, me, and even to interact with them. I did not have this my whole life. In fact, I didn't have it until about a dozen years ago when I went through a severe mental health crisis brought on by addiction to cocaine and some other variables. But when I came out of it, I had this extraordinary ability. And that's one of the things that led to me getting clean and sober. I'm like, listen, there's no way you can come out of a mental health struggle like I did, have this ability and have people believe you if you are still, in fact, using coke and any other drug. Right. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wanted to get clean and sober to reconnect with my family, which I've done. But that was definitely a catalyst. Plus, I knew I was connected to something more than what I'd gone through my whole life, or I knew it was there. I wanted connected to it. I saw more. Since then, I definitely believe I'm connected to it. I believe we all are. But that was really the catalyst for this Upside Vision. And to give you an idea what it looks like, and I use these references because between the two of them, somebody's seen them. The first one is an Iron Man, Tony Stark in his office. When he's in his office, he's surrounded by the universe, a holographic universe that he interacts with. That's a good example of what it looks like, because usually tinted one color or clear. If you have not seen the Iron Man movies, there's a movie called The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. And the protagonist is laying in her bed in some of the scenes, and she's looking at the ceiling, and she sees these images of the chess pieces. She's a chess player, and she can move them around, and she can move a couple of moves ahead. And that's how she educates herself and teaches herself. When I saw that, I was like, it's like this person had the same thing I did. So that's what, if you want a visual of it, that is what it looks like. And that's the art they used in the peer-reviewed paper, or actually currently under peer review paper that Ion submitted. I can't remember the publication it's submitted to, but they're waiting for a peer review on that. Basically, the image on the left is how I see the room like that. Make no mistake, when I walk into a room, I see the same thing. I have to shift my attention and then focus my eyes, and these other things come into being. And we can discuss, are they outside of me? The answer is yes, but they're also, once I pay attention to them, I can interact with them and change them with a thought.
So I'm just showing a website for the audio people. The website is consultingproductions.com, right? /Upsight Vision Tom Matt. And there'll be a link in the show notes, but this kind of has an artist rendition of what this Upsight is.
And, Dean Radin, right? I emailed a bunch of traditional academics because I'm like, listen, I figured neuroscientists, they were going to want to get me in a lab. I was going to be like, I can do this on demand. I don't have to wait. I don't have to be any kind of altered state. And it took me so long to get a response, or I got responses. They're like, no, thank you. Dean Radin is, tell me more. And I told him more. He's like, we typically don't do kind of research like that. And I'm like, well, what about this, this, and this? Anyway, he finally is like, all right, let me turn this over to some other scientists and we can see if we can get you up here. And that's what we did. And that's what I did last summer.
So is it always there for you, this sort of holographic imagery? Is it there all the time, or like, can you turn it on and off at will? Or
So it's always there. As long as I turn my attention, I can focus on it. So in the beginning, going to bed was exhausting because I'd lay down and let's say it would be an image of two dogs barking or kids throwing a Frisbee. But I would, and it really took me longer than it should have to figure this out. I'm like, you know what? I need to imagine or picture a stream, like a river, something calming, or an ocean. So after a while, I learned to do that. And that's what I do every night when I go to bed. So yeah, it is available to me all the time.
Is it like that sort of magic eye, those magic eye pictures from the 90s, the late 80s, 90s, where you kind of like lose the focus in your eyes and then this 3D image comes to you?
Well, I don't lose it, but that's actually a good example of how you have to see it and focus on it. Here, I'll give you another example of how to do it. So if I was driving a car, and you and I, let me say it's not good memory recall or a vivid mind's eye. It is not those things. So if you and I are driving a car, or if I'm driving a car and you're my passenger, and we're like, hey, do you remember the Star Wars poster as a kid? And I'd be like, yeah, and I could picture that in my mind. And I could still drive the car while I'm picturing it. If I'm doing upside vision, there's no way I can operate a machinery like that. I could be a passenger. I could not drive a car and do it. Because I have to pay attention to what I'm looking at. So once I'm engaged with that, I need to be still. You know what I mean? I can't do something else.
Well, let's stick with the ions research then, because they did an analysis of this, and the findings were interesting, right? Because they could tell that the way you're describing it is sort of closer to reality. Then it's not just your imagination. It's not like something that's external to the point where other people can see it, but somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. So this is what we did, right? So we get up there and we were talking about doing an fMRI. Let's see what area my brain lights up when I do it. And let me come back to that. Actually, let me talk about that now, because it's important. Remember, I came out of a severe mental health crisis. I'd walked out on my family. I thought my business was a front for some government agency. I mean, I was really, really psychotic, really. And I flew around the globe, spent all my money and stayed in these 5-star hotels. I eventually ended up homeless in California. And I checked myself into a psych ward because I'm like, and I'd had a history with addiction, but I'd been 5 years clean. And as a drug addict, you're like, you don't want to spend all your money. But the executive area of my brain, the area that plans ahead, was not functioning. I mean, I walked out on a business of 15 years. I owned an ad agency, and I walked out, it was thriving. It was a business, functioning business. But something happened. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I had to cut 2 MRIs, right? Because I was like, something's wrong with my brain. I'm not thinking normally. I'm not seeing normally. I believe ridiculous things. So I had 2 MRIs. There is no stroke, lesion, brain damage, no damage from drug use or tumors. So we know my brain is healthy. It's nothing pathological or wrong with it. But the scientists said, and again, these are clinicians and traditional scientists, and I saw a bunch of them. All they could tell me is something opened up in my brain and areas of my brain were connected that were not connected before. I mean, thank you. I mean, that's why I'm here. Obviously, that's happening. So, and we still don't have answers, but something is still open and it's on. So when we got to ions, we talked about getting an fMRI, but it was going to be too complicated and they'd have to partner with some other people for the equipment. What we could do was hook my brain up to an EEG machine, measuring the brainwave states while I'm using Upsight. So we did 200 experiments, a control. It was my brain state when I'm looking or when I see an image, and then use memory recall, right? Or mind's eye, and then the same image with upside vision. Now, the guy that ran the test, the guy that's calling the Mozart of EEG testing, right? He's done over 160 of these things. He writes the books that other students are trained on to do this. He's like, this is one of the most unambiguous cases of brain states he's seen. So, wow. Yeah, so the brain state, when the alpha waves, let's talk about that. That was the most obvious example. And your alpha brain state is when you're sitting there, it's calm, right? So believe it or not, when I'm doing memory recall, the brain is calm. But when I was using Upsight or seeing with Upsight, it was more active. And it was like Rudolph's nose. It was just really bright. It was a blue color. There's an image on the IONS website about that. If they want to check it, it's I can't remember the name of it. It was written by one of the scientists. There's one by me, Tom Matt. The other person that wrote it is one of the scientists. It may say staff scientist, but it's easy to find. But the brain states were different between all of them. Now, I thought before going up there, it was going to be the theta state, which is the dream state. And I was all convinced. I'm like, oh, I'm, actively using my brain state, because obviously when you're sleeping, you see these images. Now, there was a difference there, but the one that jumped off the charts was this one, the one that you're showing now.
Is this the one? Okay, so this is
the alpha brain state.
Shows the spectrum recall and the spectrum upside. Yeah.
Right. And on the left is typical. Let's call the image on the left a regular person's brain when they're thinking about an image. On the right is me seeing that image with upside vision.
Okay. Okay.
Do you get to pick what you see?
What's that?
Do you get to pick what you see all the time?
All right, great question. So,
control over this?
No, this is good. This is good. So you and I are talking about something. If I were to look now, it may be related to this conversation, but it's just as likely to be something else, something that's unrelated. Now, once I'm interacting with it, let's say if I looked over and there was two guys throwing a Frisbee. Once I'm engaged with it, I can turn that Frisbee into a football. I can make those guys jump in dragsters and drive away, and that will happen. So it's both. It is an external until it's an internal. It's almost like hearing a noise, with your ears, your senses, but responding with your voice. So it's both.
I think we kind of.
What about, like, can it ever startle you? Like, is it ever negative? Is it ever a negative experience? Or are you ever like, fuck this Upsight, man? It's really got to go.
100%. It's without a doubt. I've seen some of the most horrible things you can imagine. Anything you can imagine or things you don't want to, I've seen. And when that happens, I literally just jump out of it, right? I don't want to see it. Like, the worst, probably the most scariest thing I said is a bucket, like what you think of a KFC bucket filled with baby parts. I'm like, why would I need to see that? So I jumped out of it. And I've done remote viewing, telepathy, lucid dreaming. I can do do well. And so I do other things with it. Now, I'm not an expert in any of those other psi phenomena that I just mentioned, because I focused on using, the holographic images that I can interact with. But there's elements of all of those things associated with this.
I think there might have been something about the theta waves that I think I interrupted you when I put that thing on the screen there. But you were saying that you expected it to be theta, but really it was alpha. Did I miss something in there?
Well, it's both. It's both. The theta waves is the dream state that's active during dream states, and it's also the guy that did the test too, or somebody told me this, that's also the wave state they see active when people are in medium mode. You know what I mean? People that we think of as mediums. That's the state they see the biggest change in. So I was intrigued by that.
So did it surprise them that it was the alpha state that?
I did. I think so. Yeah, I think all of it. I think the biggest thing that surprised them how unambiguous this was. Right, there was like such an obvious change between these two states. So we're very curious. All of us, all the scientists, IONS Institute themselves. To get back up there, let's get a bigger data set. So one of the goals, the reason I'm coming on these podcasts talking about this is because I want to find other people that have this, because I absolutely believe other people have it. And even though I said, because it did start for me from a mental health crisis, I think it's an evolutionary step. And I think people are slowly evolving into it. In fact, I think some people have it, but they've told not to use it. I talked to one woman who said she's had it since she was a child, but her mother said, don't tell anyone that, because people think you're crazy.
Yeah. Exactly.
So is there some sort of evolutionary advantage to it that you can think? Like, is this like how I guess, because for it to be an evolution, I would, at least my understanding, I'm not, and for the record, I'm not even saying I'm all in on evolution, but it seems to be at play, at least at some level. It's things, we can see things evolve in real time, even though that might not be the whole thing. Picture. That might not be the whole picture. Because it seems like as soon as people hear evolution, they assume I'm an atheist, but I'm not. But anyway, I would assume that anything that is, if that's like the next thing for us, it would have some sort of thing that is that you can use to advantage over people that don't have it. So do you have anything so like that? Because from my side, that reminds me of Final Fantasy. You're like one of those, I wasn't Final Fantasy, and you're just one of the first people that can start to see these things. But I mean, I don't think that had a happy ending. I think it's aliens or some shit, but I can't remember.
That's a great question, obviously, because you're right. Evolution, if you have a mutation, if it's a bad mutation, it's obviously not helpful. But if it's a mutation that leads to an evolutionary change, which I think it is, it's got to confer some advantage to us. So the question is, what is the advantage? And the answer is, I can't answer that as of yet. I think it's for our survival. And let me tell you, there's a word I learned when I started doing this. I read tons of books on neuroscience, and the word is umwelt. It's spelled UMWELT. It's how a biological organism moves through the environment. Right? So all of us humans move through the environment pretty much the same way with our 5 basic senses. A worm, even though it's on planet Earth, moves through an environment, the same environment, but with different senses. My umwelt, what I'm seeing is more than I did before. So people say is it an interdimensional? I think maybe the better way to say it is it was an invisible biosphere or a hidden biosphere, but it's becoming unhidden. And so I can do some things with it, like remote viewing. But so here's the survival, Darren. So to take this path, you have to believe remote viewing is true, right? You have to believe some people can do it. So look, we're going to have to start there. And I understand people are skeptical about that. And I can't prove remote viewing is real, but I can definitely collect evidence that Upsight is real. That's why I've done it with the science. In any case, I can remote view certain things to certain levels of success. And I've tried to see things that you would argue are dangerous for me to see. Right? Like the Epstein murder or suicide, right? Quote unquote. I can't see it. It won't let me see it. I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is helpful. Maybe there's a reason I can't see it. I can't see Area 51. I get to it and they have this, it shows me like a metaphor, something, a dog's barking, 2 Dobermans with those traditional dogs from World War II movies. And I can't get past that. So I find that really, really interesting. So Darren, there's some other things I'm sure I'll think of while I'm talking.
Precog. What about precog?
Oh, see, all right, great question. That's another thing. Now, the precog is annoying too, because I'll see something like a bridge collapse. 4 hours later, bridge collapses in Ohio. I see this online, right? Okay, then I'll see 5 other things. Let's call them catastrophic that I never see again or hear from again. So even though it points to it, I don't know how to train it, use it, or get better at it. And I don't know if I want to, I don't know if there's so many other things to do before that.
Yeah. So just back to the ion study quickly, were they aware of anything that matches that? Like if they measure meditators, like, monks brain waves when they're meditating, like could somebody with really good control of their mind do that? Like make that thing all blue? Like, does it match something like that? Like if they were focusing on something.
Yeah, I don't know. That's good because I know they can create those states with magnets and there's certain machinery. Because there was another test that there's a word I'm looking for. They inhibited the use of the prefrontal brain, and that's the way it showed up, right? Or something like it. Now, okay, yeah. I can't answer that only for things I've read. That monks can kind of get to that state, right? These other people can get to the state and they can change it, but I'm not somebody that can do that. That's another way to prove that it's science too. That's external. My pupils dilate while this happens. Sometimes you cannot willfully dilate your pupils. It can only be done with an external input, a stimuli, whether it's something exciting or arousing. My pupils will dilate.
Huh.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go from here, Darren? Do you have any questions at all?
I'm like, I'm trying to picture if I could see some things, but I feel like it would just drive me nuts most of the time. Can you find some honor with it or something? Like, have you found any sort of, is there something that might be triggering it? Some sort of natural phenomenon or something in the environment that it might be triggering you about or something like that? Do you think or do you notice any sort of thing that stimulates it in a way that more than usual?
So no, but there are certain times of the day. It seems later in the afternoon it can be stronger. It can be stronger sometimes when I'm at the beach. Now, this is a wild story. When I was, I've been on a bunch of plane rides since this happened. I don't sit in first class or business class most of the time. This time in the last 6 months, I did, right? And the images were brighter. They were like really, really hard, like seemed more intense, for lack of another word, like the volume was turned up. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, all these brains are behind me, right? We're all facing forward. And maybe there was like an amplification around this because it was so extraordinary. And I've thought about it since then. I'm like, I wonder if we could get in that scenario. And I don't even know if it's worth it, but to see if, did somebody else have it on the plane? Or is it just the fact that there were more brains, that were behind me, more brain amplification for any reason? Now, those things are just things I've told. I don't know, how do we reproduce that again?
Yeah. Were you at altitude yet, or were you still on the ground?
Oh yeah, no, altitude. It happened the whole time when I was at altitude for like the 2 hours of the flight.
I mean, I wonder if that's something to do with it too. Like, if
the other times it hadn't. Altitude, it wasn't necessarily stronger on the other flights. Only when I was at the front of the plane. So that was really interesting. Now, I'll tell you a story I've told on a bunch of podcasts that are more that just different. They like to talk about UFOs and the aliens because this happened in the first year that I did this. So I'm remote viewing, right? I'm sitting there and I didn't call it remote viewing then. I was just using Upsight vision, right? And I'm looking at, and the next thing I know, I'm in space. And the next thing I know, I'm in a spacecraft with a dozen gray aliens, right? And they're standing in this circle. They're standing in the circle and it looks like they're looking down on this empty, clear table. As I get closer, I realize that they are remote viewing a town in the US and their eyes are following the people. The eyes are following the people. And when the person walked out of one gray alien's eyes, field of view, the other gray alien next to it would pick it up. And I'm starting to watch this and starting to pay particular attention. This is all this happened in less than a minute. So I'm watching this and I'm realizing, I'm like, wow, we can learn from this. So what is this? Is this real? And the next thing you know, two of the gray aliens turned to look at me and I jumped back. And that was the end of that because I was so startled that something could see me doing what I was doing. Now, I don't know what they actually saw. All I know, I was like, I do not want to be a part of this any longer. It was scary. It was cool too.
Have you speculated about that at all? Like, what do you think they were doing? Just monitoring some part of?
Well, I think their eyes are like, what's the word? Radars of some kind, and they're picking up. Yeah, I absolutely do think they would do that, and I also think, they were doing something as a group, so it amplified it like a chorus. It was stronger because of that. Again, this is all speculation, but I think those things seem to be true, or could be true.
But what about ancient encounters with, religious experiences or divine encounters in ancient times? Like, I've wondered about.
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed you. I disconnected, guys.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering if you've read about any encounters from ancient times, like ancient religious experiences or encounters with the divine. It seems like those are to me, like they're not necessarily hallucinations. They're not necessarily like physical encounters, but so many people have had religious experiences in the past. I wonder if some of that is similar to what's happening to you.
So there's been visual images, if you want to call them angels, winged beings, but the stories I hear about interviewing of connecting with the divine are so much better and more powerful than the things I'm seeing. As cool as they are, I don't think it's God. That's what's wild. I think it's a biological. That's another reason, Darren. I think it's something human. I don't think maybe we can connect to it, but I think what I'm doing is it's not that. And I think I know other people have it in one form or another because I get emails after every podcast say, oh, I can do something like this, but I can't interact with them. And it seems like another theme is trauma. Everyone has had some kind of trauma, whether it's physical, whether it's mental or emotional. So that maybe, and if you know anything about the X-Men, this is like you're like, wait, really? In the, what's the guy's name? Magneto, he developed his, or he learned about his when he was in the concentration camps. Now that's a fictional story, but the fact that trauma is a common theme makes you wonder.
Yeah. I was wondering if you've read about the Rosicrucians at all or their theories. I'm reading this book right now.
No, I can't have to. I can't remember.
Let me read this. Let me
I
read this
have-
quick. Let me read this quick excerpt for you because it seems to be sort of related. It says, when we're in health, we specialize solar energy in such great quantities that we cannot use it all in the body, and therefore it radiates through the pores of our skin in straight streams and serves a similar purpose as an exhaust fan. So what they're saying is this machine drives the foul air out of a room. Like if you're healthy and you're absorbing all the sunlight, you can basically keep the atmosphere within pure and sweet. But it gets better here. It says, it is a curious and most astounding sight when one first observes how from exposed parts of the body, such as hands and face, there suddenly commences to flow a stream of stars, cubes, pyramids, and a variety of other geometrical forms. The writer has more than once rubbed his eyes when he first perceived the phenomena, for it seemed that he must be suffering from hallucinations. The forms observed are chemical atoms, however, which have served their purpose in the body and are expelled through the pores.
So that's really interesting. So I have not heard that. But let me tell you this, when I first had it, I became obsessed with mathematics, right? So I was sitting on the couch, getting better, right? Staying off drugs, completely sober, but I had some PTSD, I had some trauma, I connected with the family. And I sat there and I started to read a lot about math. The reason is not because something drew me, because I saw there was no topological space, no torus, no manifold that I could not deconstruct, dissect in my field of vision. So there's no doubt that there was a mathematical and a fractal element that I still have to this day. And not only that, they would present these problems to me, mathematical problems. And when I found a solution to them, they would either go to the next one. If you want to say they were harder, it was the next level. Maybe they weren't harder, but it was another level. When I figured that out, there was another level. And I have this multi-dimensional coordinate system completely built in my mind. I could sit down with an architect, somebody with a blueprint. We could translate the whole thing and I could upload it to a software program. It would probably take some time to do it. But that is one of the things I want to do. So there's no doubt there's an element of fractal and geometric piece to this that I can interact with. And I'm a part, and not only that, I'm a part of it. Like you're saying, I am a part of it.
It really reminds me of the downloads, the people that have had these downloads of scientific data or mathematical data, but yours is in a visual representation or something.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. And there's equations that come up with it. It's funny. It's like a series of downloads. I'll say it like that. It's a series of downloads that led to this system, this coordinate system. But the other downloads, this is what's so wild or maybe a little frustrating. I cannot win the Kentucky Derby, right? I cannot pick, and believe me, I tried, right? This thing, in fact, it doesn't want me to do that. It does not want to do an easy path where you can figure that out. So there's an element to, it can show things if it wants to, but if for whatever reason it doesn't want to. And Darren, that's another thing. That's a survival thing. In a weird way, not showing me that is, again, another smart thing to be. Because if you have that ability, people are going to want that. It's put you in danger. You can make a very strong case.
Yeah. So that kind of gets back to Darren's question about whether you can control it or not. So if you meditate on something, like you see these shapes and these holograms, you can see them all the time, but they're there no matter what, if you're focusing them on or not. Right. But when you if you meditated and you wanted to focus on a dodecahedron or something, for example, you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. And in fact, the images I see are nothing I've seen in mathematics because they're not your typical dodecahedron or your circle, square. These shapes are different, but they're also part of, I think, this hidden biosphere, right? I think they're part of it that we don't typically see because our brains are not open to it. Our human brains are not open to this.
What do you mean the hidden biosphere then?
Well, again, that's what I think. The word well, we are biological organisms. We are all on planet Earth. There are things here that I think humans cannot see. Call them non-human intelligences. And you stumble across them. I gave you the one about the Greys, but I've seen other kind of beings. In fact, while I was doing this testing up at IONS, And this happens, this is historic. So let me take a step back. While I was doing a test in ions, this gray alien shows up, right? In holographic form, let's be honest, in holographic form. Now, I have two choices: finish the testing or get distracted by it. So it showed up a couple of times and I ignored it, right? Because I knew I didn't want it. That's not the goal of this testing. It would have messed up all the results, whatever, and it just went away. Now, I'd read stories where people that are doing like these yogis and meditators, they've been meditating and these beings showed up and they went to their teachers and they're like, listen, ignore them. You know, you're meditating, ignore them. And to me, it's like, well, hold on a minute. Well, why would you ignore something like that? I mean, I guess, you know, it should be looked at deeper as opposed to just ignore them. Maybe we need to think about this way more seriously than we do.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, that maybe there is a message in there, or at least find out their true intention. Are they blocking you from progressing any further, or are they there to watch you only, or what?
Right. And there's people that call themselves starseeds that get messages from these beings all the time. That's not my journey at all. I mean, you know, that is not it. If I had to say, my mission is to figure out what's going on through our traditional scientific, you know, academic, traditional technology and stuff like that. It's not about sending a message that we need to be nicer to each other, which of course we do. We need to be better, which of course we are. We need to treat the planet, you know, as nice as we can. If climate change is real, whether it's our fault or just normal cycle, I don't know. Or maybe it's a little both. The point is that these guys, I say this because there's some kind of guidance. I do feel like I'm being prodded along in my doofus way, in my slow way, to try to figure this out. And one of the things is to connect other people that have it. I feel that's a very strong thing, to let people know that this thing, if they have something like this, they need to think about it and not dismiss it.
And you never know. I mean, they could be tested, and you could have started the first baseline here where it's like, hey, people, because it would be hard to match the results if you just went in there through the imagination trying to picture these things. You know, I don't think it would be easy for somebody just to go in and, you know, match or fake these results, kind of. You know, it seems to me like
agreed. You can't. So let's talk about that for just a minute. So another way, it's evolutionary, right? So if you know people that take trip on psilocybin or any kind of mushrooms, right? There's group hallucinations. So you get 10 guys, everyone's tripping, and everyone sees the exact same thing in this altered state. But they don't, you know, when they all come down, they're like, wow, did you see that? Yeah, man, it was crazy. That's it. It's dismissed and it's done. Nobody tries to reproduce it because you can't reproduce that state. What if, in fact, their brains were in a certain frequency, right? Their brains were at a certain frequency. What if I was in the room and I was a control, right? And what if I'm seeing the exact same thing they're seeing? Now we're on to something. Right. And then another thing, that's one thing. What if another person that has upsight vision, what if we're in the same room together and we can, in fact, see the same exact image and both influence at our own time? Now we're talking nonverbal communication, telepathy, psi, something that clearly would want to be studied. There's nobody, I don't think, that would not want to study that, except for somebody's afraid of whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the mainstream scientific paradigm wants to study that. I mean, they just want to keep ignoring the results from places like ions.
Have you met anyone else with it then?
So I have not met anyone else with it to my degree, but I'm in contact with a woman who, after conversations, because I kind of can ask questions to see how serious they are and how far they are. I think she does have it, and I'm going to meet with her. She's in Oregon now. And again, I'm on the East Coast. When she comes back here, I plan on meeting with her. I'm hope to meet with her in the next 90 days and see if what I think could happen does in fact happen. But let's say it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it can't. It just means the circumstances aren't right, you know?
Yeah.
Have you ruled out some sort of synesthesia?
Well, I think it is some sort of synesthesia. I think it has that element to it for sure. Yeah, I do. I think it has an element.
The big one is like smelling colors or some shit, if I remember correctly. But this could be like something like that. It sort of seems like it could be an offshoot of that.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think it has that element to it.
Interesting. So somebody in the chats here says suckly eye or something. He says, or she says, sounds like he's connecting to people, us, outside the simulation.
Look, It does feel like that too. It does feel like there's, I'm connecting to some kind of matrix, and it's not like there's a way out either. That's what's so wild. It's not like I see these, if you want to use the Matrix movie, it's not like I see these beings controlling us. I do not see that at all. Sometimes I see beings, but I see them stumble around. But this is a perfect example. A 3D world, if you walk into a forest or a jungle, right, and you stick your head in the jungle, you see all these beings are there, or you don't see them. There's tons of living creatures there. Some of those creatures notice us. Some of them completely ignore us because they don't care about us. So when I'm doing Upsight, some of these things pay attention to me, and most of them just ignore me. The ones that do, that's where, again, more testing needs to be done. Other people should see if they have it. Let's see if we can all see the same thing. There's so many opportunities to talk about, but you just need to get people to agree that it's worth looking into, as opposed just like this woo stuff, as opposed to just being some woo element.
What about, I keep coming back in my head to these organizations like the Rosicrucians or something, like these real like adepts that have this ancient wisdom. They practice this stuff. I feel like they could really answer a lot of this or help you develop it or something. I know that you want to stay in the mainstream scientific thing, but I just don't know if that's got the potential to
I agree.
Develop it to do anything but just try and do these measurements for it.
No, I agree. And that was my first path. Right. Since ions, I'm like, you know what? I need to have a more of an open mind, which is kind of funny. I need to think about something like that. And you know what? People do reach out to me all the time and talk about it. So maybe that will happen after this call. And I am absolutely open to working with somebody to learn more about it.
Yeah. It seems like it's very magical in a way too.
So you've been clean the whole time?
What's that? Yeah.
You've been clean, so you haven't tried mixing it with some shrooms or see if you could spice it up with a little LSD.
No, I don't want to do that. Now, I've been under doctor prescriptions for things from time to time, but no, I don't need to. That's the other thing, and I don't want to pick up again, just because I ground myself in my physical health. I'm an active runner, an athlete. I work out every day. I run every morning. I lift every other day. So I really take care of my physical body because it helps ground me mentally for not picking up again, but also it helps ground me in using this.
Yeah. That's what one of the best remote viewers in the world said about that.
Now that I did not know.
Joseph McGonigal said, like, physical health is very important for the spiritual aspect because it sort of lends itself to probably enabling you to see or feel more,
it absolutely feels that way. So I told you guys earlier that it's maybe in the afternoon it's stronger, but when I am after a workout, I don't know if it's stronger, but it's it's almost it's easier for me to plug in. Again, it's always easy to plug in, but I don't know, it's hard to explain until you do it.
Let's go back to the genesis of how this happened then, because I don't want to run out of time. And because I'm in recovery too, coming up on like 16 years, but I went through some crazy sort of cocaine experiences as well, right? So I kind of know what it was like for you. I saw some things that I thought were real at the time. Now I don't even fucking know if they're real. But that's what?
I never got no hallucinations off the cocaine.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. It's because I was in psychosis, right? I think it's like, after, if you use it too much and too long without sleep and with drinking, like you end up in a pretty crazy, like hallucinogenic state.
Yeah. So my book is called Jesus Goes to Hollywood, a Memoir of Madness. It's available on Amazon if anyone's interested. The first 2/3 of it is kind of like a family drama and what happened, and my stories about being run out of hotels because I thought demons were chasing me, leaving all my luggage with all the legal problems and being homeless. The last 1/3 of it is trying to find answers to what happened to my brain, how I can see this state. But when I was actively psychotic, there were not as many hallucinations. In fact, very few. However, there were psychotic thoughts. So I would have a thought and I believed it to be true. Let's say I read an article and I say this in the book about something about local sheriff has affair with local woman. In my mind, I'm like, oh, my wife's sleeping with a cop. That's it. And then I would believe it, right? Then I believe it. That's how bizarre and wild it was. I thought my kids were replaced by alien doppelgangers. I mean, I was so completely out of touch with any reality. So when I stopped using, I still had this. It took a minute to get my brain back. To recalibrate. It took a minute, and I still had psychotic thoughts, but they were less and less, and they finally went away. But this visual, whatever opened up and kept open. And by the way, the year that I was completely, on all kinds of drugs, I did shrooms. I mean, I did use and have hallucinations the year I was using.
So you went 5 years sober, and then you relapsed for a year?
Yeah, I did.
For a whole year?
I went 5 years sober, and I just picked up. I got bored. I was into triathlons and everything like that. And I just picked up. And this time it was different. This time it was a little bit different. They say you die or whatever. You
ruin the recovery ruins your using.
Yeah, exactly. And it did. But that, again, that was a dozen years ago now, or 11 years ago. So it was a long time ago. And it's weird. It's funny. It's wild to think about that. Somebody asked me the other day, they're like, do you ever think about, the things that your family went through? My children are grown men now, they're 25 and 28, and, they remember it because they were in middle school and stuff. And I was crazy dad, you know what I mean? But right now we're so much closer and they remember it, but it's not like, they don't think of me like that. They don't think of the horrible things that happen. They think of, okay, dad's got this wild ability. You know what I mean? He's looking for answers, and he's talking about it on podcasts. It's cool. But they know me now as clean and sober for a long time.
Yeah. So you didn't have any physical hallucinations in your first, before you got sober for the 5 years? Did you have any psychosis?
No, nothing
like that.
Nothing. No, that's what was so wild too. I knew something in my brain. And I think that's important for me on this journey. It's funny. Yeah. At first I was like, wow, since I was psychotic and crazy and had a mental illness, no one's going to believe me. But in a really weird way, it grounds the conversation, because people are saying, well, do you think you're going crazy? I'm like, actually, no, because I was crazy. And here's a reference. And here's what it was like. So it's all in a weird way, it was like, it's this starting point of this new life that's happened. And when people say that, it's like, no, it's not the case at all.
Well, and it plays such an important part because so you didn't even for that year of relapse, you didn't have any physical hallucinations or
No, I had psychotic thoughts. I was absolutely psychotic thoughts. I would go down.
I was expecting to hear the
rabbit holes of governments following me around.
Oh yeah,
followed around. That was without a doubt. This traditional paranoia. Somebody's outside the window. That classic cocaine use.
Well, I mean, I used to have that, but I used to see them out there too. You'd see them, you'd have.
Maybe I did, but it's not. For sure I did. What do you think about it like that? Sure. Yeah. But it happened that was high all the time, so you kind of thought it was part of what you were doing.
And that's why I think it's such an important part too, because with that 5 years of sobriety and then, sort of triggering that whole brain mechanism again, that whole, the rush, the dopamine, all that, you could have opened something up during that process or triggered some sort of mechanism or something.
No, Graham, I think that's what happened. I mean, it was like this perfect storm of all this stuff. The first drug use, then getting extremely physically fit, right? Yeah. And then picking up again, and my brain just flashed open, believing crazy things, and then just trauma. I mean, PTSD, there's no doubt that I had PTSD. I mean, you go from owning, and my book starts with me literally spilling entering a kerosene on my back patio and lighting it on fire. I wanted to burn my house down because I thought the helicopters were going to come around and everyone would see what was going on in the house. I mean, that's how sick I was. Yeah. That's how the book starts. And thank God I called the cops called the fire department and said, listen, somebody set the house on fire.
And it wasn't me.
It wasn't me. Right. That's what I told them.
So when did you first notice it then? What was your first experience then when you were using for a year there? And because I guess it happened towards the end of that, right? Because this is part of your second sobriety story, right?
So this is what's so the funny thing is the first time I did see it, I was actually on coke. That's what's so wild. So here's what I'm sitting on the couch. I do a bump of coke. I see 4 distinct images. Holographic form. Number 1, the back of a dinosaur. Number 2, red blood cells moving through the body. Number 3, a slot machine. And number 4, the Grim Reaper. All those things happen. No shit, right? And I think there's a little symbolism in those that I sometimes think about when I want to play around. And then that I was like, okay, that was like a catalyst. I'm like, holy shit, if I could see this while I'm sober, it's going to change. I'm like, it's going to change the world. I had that grandiose thought. And I mean, I think it is going to change the world, but I don't have grandiose thoughts anymore. I have extraordinary thoughts because this is an extraordinary thing. This is not, I can't pretend this is not unusual. I can't pretend that.
And you're not acting like the chosen one, I mean.
No, I'm just, good God. Actually, well, look, the Jesus Goes to Hollywood, a memoir of madness. For like 2 weeks, I thought I was Jesus. Because you want to know why? A synchronistic event. I'm in rehab. So during the year, even 3 months in, I'm like, I got to get clean and sober if I want to figure out what's going on. This is before the hallucinations, just the psychosis. I'm in rehab and the synchronicity happens. I'm holding a Bible and I have a fruit punch in my hand. The fruit punch spills out and it splashes on my knees. I opened the Bible passage and it said, and the blood spilled on the garment of Jesus. Something like that. And like, that's it. I'm Jesus. I'm telling you, it was insane. And then that bar was too high. I didn't stay Jesus. It was just too, and I know that's psychotic thought now, but at the time for a couple of weeks, I was like, or a couple of days, I was like, okay. But then you realize, wait, that's just a coincidence. These synchronistic events are really extraordinary and they can point to things, but they don't mean are real. They're just kind of, it means, it's the universe winking and saying, pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. I had a synchronicity in rehab with a book as well.
No joke.
So I was avoiding this Qigong class because they had Qigong class every morning. And I was just waiting for it, but I just got there and I was super tired, of course, right? I mean, I was sleeping for as much as I could for a few days there. I finally go to Qigong and I had the most amazing Qigong experience. I thought that is incredible. And at the time I was reading to the group for some stupid reason. I was reading and myself, but I was reading Eckhart Tolle's New Earth, right? So I that night after the first day I did Qigong, that night we're in the group and I've got my book out and I open it up and the first word I looked, just random page, the first word I looked down, I looked at the word Qigong in there. And it's probably the only place in the book that word is there, but I just happened to just pick out that one word out of everything. And it was, that was pretty mind blowing.
Yeah. I don't
Qigong then?
What's that?
Did you go to Qigong?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was like, I kept going. Yeah, it was awesome.
I would have still quit. I would have said, fuck you, universe.
You know what? That is a fair comment, man. That is an absolute fair comment. And I feel it too.
Nice try. Hey, do you have that book? One of my guys is going to rehab.
Me?
What book?
The one you were talking about there. Maybe I'll give it to him.
Oh, the Eckhart Tolle book, the New Earth.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
He's about to have a bunch of time on his hands.
Oh, is he?
You were in like so you didn't get sent there by the court, so you checked yourself in, right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
but it's the one you can't leave.
This one,
right?
Well, yeah.
He's
this
not
one
allowed to leave.
Right. Yeah, I could leave. I just couldn't come back. I guess you're allowed to leave, but you can't come back. Yeah. But it was good. I mean, that was the best thing I had done is go to that recovery place.
Yeah. Recovery, it works. Maybe the first one doesn't, but sometimes if you want it to work eventually and things get shitty enough.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit to just the brain pattern if we just take the hallucination or the holographic, the Upsight effect out of it? Is there like what else can we do in that brain pattern? Have you looked into that at all? Like, is that because it's
you mean with ions, with the one they showed the EEG?
Yeah, like because you're putting your brain into some sort of altered state, is it opening it up for maybe you could learn stuff faster, or maybe is it?
So Darren, so that's wild that you asked that. So I can't answer that question from my perspective, but I know this. There is a pharmaceutical company in Portugal that is doing research with an American institution for Alzheimer's patients, right? To try to actively change the brain states because they think if they activate, again, I think it's the left prefrontal something, I can't think of what it's called, it kind of slows down Alzheimer's. So they're looking at that now. Now, the thing that intrigues me about that study is that why are they looking at that? Because they're using electromagnetic waves to stop it. That's not pharmaceutical. So I'm wondering, you know what I mean? So the fact that they're looking at it, there's somebody that's studying that wave state to help stall the spread of Alzheimer's. At least that's if I understand the study correctly. So I'm not doing it, but somebody else is.
I wonder if they'll see the stuff as a side effect.
What's that?
I wonder if they'll see the upside as a side effect.
You know what? Well, funny you say that. I think they have. I think that's part of the study because they said there was another part, and I don't want to go into it because I don't remember too much, but how there was other side effects from this, and they were more like telepathy or something like that. There were some other side effects. That's in fact why I clicked on the article.
Well, I heard you say something about telepathy too that I wanted to mention because it was really fascinating because people are worried about like Joe Rogan even talks about it a lot. Oh, eventually we'll be able to read each other's thoughts and all that. But the way you describe the potential is like different layers, right? Like we might be able to, there might be able to be a group telepathy that we can sort of handle. That doesn't mean it's going to go into my deepest, darkest thoughts and desires, but.
No, well, and because whatever's doing it with me, it's happening now. So there's this in-between space. Think about it. It's just like a thought. If you have a thought, and you voice your thought, right? So there is I call remote viewing the in-between place, right? If somebody can get in your lucid dreams like an Inception, forget it. We're screwed then because then they could dive into everything we're doing. I don't know if that's possible, but this remote viewing space, this common area where we can see other beings and see other things, I think we can also telepathically communicate with them, or at least holographically is what I call it, and it's safe. It's not they're having you're sharing a thought with them that you're willing to share. Now, obviously, that's just my perspective right now. I could come back in a year and say that's not okay because it's so new. And again, people have studied telepathy way longer than I have, and they have a lot more research on it. But from my experience, there's definitely a safe place where people can communicate without talking, non-verbally, non-sign language, at least holographically. So I imagine the thought too.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, we've been saying that they've sort of suppressed our awareness about how special we are as human beings and how powerful our brains are. Somebody was mentioning in the chat there how the brains can do as many functions. That it's interesting to see this manifestation because I feel like we have a lot of power to manifest, a lot of power to heal, a lot of different powers that they don't really want us to be aware of.
Listen, if I'm any indication, there's no doubt that's the case. The question is, how do we turn them on without, I don't want anyone to go through. That's another thing. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through, right? Maybe we can turn them on without trauma. Maybe if we know this from a young age, and when we see something as a kid, like, hey, mom, I see this. She's like, oh, well, let's look at that. Let's learn. Let's educate ourselves on that and let's explore it. That's the future. That should be the future.
Did you have any experiences as a 7-year-old or younger? Like
no, none that I remember. And both my parents are dead, so I can't ask them. But no, none that I remember. Yeah,
because you hear that with the first 7 years, and then after that it kind of changes to the next stage. But within that first 7 years, kids have all kinds of crazy experiences. And you're right. I mean, most people probably just poo-poo the whole thing instead of like getting them to dig into it a little bit more.
So there's a disease called Charles Bonnet syndrome, right? It happens when you have macular degeneration of the eyes. When somebody's going blind, some people have the ability to see these cartoons. They come into their vision and they're going blind, but they're seeing these things. And from my perspective, it's like the brain is screaming, saying, hey, hold on a minute. Even though we can't see that way, we can see this. So some people with Charles Bonnet syndrome have learned that they can interact with them the same way I'm talking about. Others want drugs so they go away, but some people have learned that they can live with them and they could play with them, right? So if I wonder if I could communicate with somebody that's got Charles Bonnet syndrome.
Oh, that
would be very, very cool. That would be very cool.
We had what was her name, Darren? We had her on the show. I'll remember it in a couple minutes, but it was about the superhuman documentary that she did. And there's groups of people all over the world. There's some in Russia, some in here in the States, and they're training kids. Kids learn it especially easier compared to adults, but how to see without their eyes. So they're blocking out their vision and they're able to see some other way. I mean, and maybe that's developed. Carolyn Corey, yeah. Carolyn Corey. I would look up Carolyn Corey and her work on that. And I mean, maybe that's very similar. You know, if people can see without their eyes, maybe that triggers the same thing. I mean, even get them, somebody that can see without their eyes, get them into that ions thing and see what they're doing.
I would love to do that. Hopefully somebody will come forward with that. Yeah, for sure. I've speculated on that for the longest time.
Yeah, she's great. And
yeah, she is. I saw in the film you're talking about. It's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you make things other people can see? Can you make something that like we could see? Can you make something in my room? Can you do it like through a TV screen? Because you know,
so
like
I've tried this. Wait, hold on, Darren. I've tried. It's gonna fail. It just doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work. I can't. I think if you were in a room. So all right. So here's a story. Here, let's talk about this. So I'm in the elevator a couple of months ago. I'm going to meet somebody to talk about this and tell them about it, right? I'm meeting with a lawyer and another guy. And they're like, well, can you do it for us now? And I'm like, yeah, I can do it, but it may not be helpful. Don't expect anything. I'm going to see it, but we're talking about this story over here, but I'm going to show people making a pizza. So I do it. I look over to it. I'm like, guess what, guys? I'm seeing a brand new sports car in a showroom. And I look at them both. And I have no idea what that means. Right? The guy pulls out his iPhone. He goes, I just bought a sports car. And I'm like, oh shit. I mean, that was even a haul for me. I was like, wow. Right. So there's an element of that I don't know how to control. And I don't know if I want to spend time right now looking into that. That's like part 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to find more people right now. That's your goal.
Right. And so the point is, I get it. If you were in the room, I may be able to pick up something, but long distance, I've tried it and it's a fail. I know it's not worth the energy.
Yeah. Huh. So what have we left out so far before we wrap this thing up? Anything that you want to talk about before we? No,
I have if you think you have it, go to Upside Vision on Facebook and you'll see a website. It's like a kind of support group. There's 8 of us. And I don't even know, Upside Vision on Facebook. If you leave a comment, if you think you might have it and we can connect, you can follow me on Twitter, Tom E. Matt, M-A-T-T-E. Yeah, those 2 things. If you just want to follow the story that, you know, and again, if you know I tell you what, I think other people are going to come forward and you might hear somebody that has this and you know, and people are going to connect. I really, really believe that. And I think other people, and you know what's fun? This is complete speculation. You know how we're looking at our phones? I didn't even talk about this. We will finish on this note. The year I was psychotic, I had the headphones in with the dangly, the old Apple ones, right? From 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I looked at my phone all the time. I did not engage with anybody, right? So I think that did something, Graham. And this is to your point about your brain states perfectly. I looked at my phone a lot. I was hyper-focused on that small screen. This is what's happening now with every kid. They're being raised on these phones. They're being raised at this look at this thing in front of them, a small screen. Maybe there's something going on with the brain that is up-regulating a gene and it's going to open something up. So maybe we're conditioning people to see that whether we know it or not, something opening in the brain, whether we know it or not.
And what about mediums? Like you mentioned that area in the elevator, that time in the elevator. What about mediums or clairvoyance? Like when a clairvoyant sees something in the future or sees that, do they have that, but they don't realize they have it? You know, I mean, maybe there's
that's good. That's a great question too. That's a test, right? I need to go with somebody who is a medium that can see these images. Are they getting, if they're sitting there going, I see a yellow scarf and a woman in a black dress. If I'm seeing a freaking black woman, now we're talking, right? But I don't want to go to I'm not big on going to a creepy haunted house. I'll go to Skinwalker Ranch. I'll do that all day long.
That's worse than a haunted house.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. They talk about the hitchhiker effect. Have you heard about that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, and this goes to what I said, when you look into these unknown places and the thing sees you and it knows it can engage you. It's like, hold on a minute. This guy sees me. It's like a kid catching something in a forest and bringing it home. They could follow you home because they know you see him. But I feel kind of protected by whatever has got I feel like there's something that's got my back in the organic metaverse. That's what I call it. I feel like something's got my back. But I'm willing to take that risk for science.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, right.
What about your
Tom.
book?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. This has been great. Where can people get the book? Where's the best place to buy it? Social media, websites, all that stuff.
Yeah, but Jesus Goes to Hollywood, a memoir on madness, is available on Amazon. You can get it digitally, buy it, ship it to your house, whatever works. And again, Tommy Matt on Twitter, and Upsight Vision on Facebook. Those are the places you can reach me if you want to follow my story, or if you think you have it, or you just want to connect and send me a message. This has been great, guys. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
fun.
and of course, Matt is Matte if people are trying to spell that out.
Yeah, thank you, Darren.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, Matt, or Tom Matt. Have a great time.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks, Graham.
See ya. Thanks, Tom.
Ciao.
Ciao.
And that was a chat with Tom Matt. What'd you think?
Wow, that was fun. That was great.
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
Up Dog.
I don't know what that is.
What? You're supposed to say,
What?
"What's up, dog?" You ruined it.
That reminds me of Darren. Did you know that people in the audience they've been oh my God, see, I just ruined the joke right there.
There you go.
they've been possessed. Darren, the people in the audience have been possessed by an owl.
What owl?
You're supposed to say who?
Oh. We better just stay away from the jokes. We're not meant to be comedians, I guess. Big thanks to Tom for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Even bigger thanks if you're one of our supporters. You know what they say. Support the show, please. It's value for value show. It's not free. It seems free. It's free. You can get it for free. 645, 46, 47 episodes by the time this one comes out. All out there, all available for free. But if you're getting some value from them things, you could send a little value back our way. You could sign up for one of those monthly donations that really help us keep things going around here. Or you can send a one-time donation and we will read your note on the show and, make you Grimerica famous. Thank you publicly. And you're supposed to say, "Someone told me you sound like an owl." Is that how you say it?
Thanks. And just for the people that are watching, we're coming back. We'll be back in like a half hour with a live show about the fertility crisis on Grimerica Outlawed.
I don't have that problem. I'm too fertile. Anyway, big thanks to Tom for coming on the show. Grimerica.ca/support, guys. If you can, when you can, send some value back our way. We'd be forever grateful. Hey, some ways you can send some value back our way that don't cost you anything. We understand times are tough. You can share the show because it's hard to find us. So if you just share us around, that'd be great. You can watch Adult Brain on YouTube. Adult Brain Audiobooks YouTube channel. There's a bunch of great audiobooks for free. You can share the audiobooks, adultbrain.ca, with people that like audiobooks. And you can watch Grimerica Outlawed and share that. Spam Gram. All sorts of great ways to support the show. By the way, the Eclipse is coming up and it's selling fast. Contact@thecabin.com if you want to come and hang out with us at the Eclipse. Other than that, we love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.